welcome to the Motivational Mindset Podcast with me, Richard Knight from Switch Motivation. In episode 15, I've been speaking with Emily Cooke, PE teacher and former international rugby player.
Okay, hi. So I'm Emily Cooke. I was Feltham. I'm currently a teacher, so I teach PE and design technology, amongst many other things. I've done that for many years now, a few different schools. And in my previous life, I was a rugby player. So I played rugby for Richmond. I did a season at Clifton, and I played internationally. So I played for England as well for a number of years. The teaching thing is because I enjoy the teaching. I like teaching. I enjoy teaching the kids, and every day is different, not always in a good way. And really, the rugby is just something I fell into by chance and fell in love with, and it just took me on the most wonderful sporting path. So, yeah, motivation-wise for the rugby, it was just love, I think.
Yeah, so interesting. Or just love. That's quite a motivator, though. Actually, when you think about it, if you've got something that elicits that form of emotion, then there must be something right with it, if you see what I mean. And that'd be interesting. If we can, we'll come back to that in a little while. That'd be really interesting to hear a little bit more about that. So, from the teaching point of view, where you are now, how has that changed? How does your as you know, and people listening might not know, but I'm an ex-teacher and I'm an ex-PE teacher. But I ran away early because I hate kids.
You escaped.
No, I don't hate kids at all. I didn't get on with the structure and the way everything happened, and it was probably taking away what I enjoyed most about the job, which was actually coaching and teaching the kids sport and all that lovely stuff. But that changed. How is it for you at the moment in comparison to when you first went into the teaching side of things?
I think that's very interesting. I think I'm very similar to you in the fact that I graduated in 99, so I've been teaching a fair few number of years now. And just in that space of time, teaching has changed hugely. It's a very different job to the job I started doing. The paperwork is extreme. The extra bits you're doing, and I know it's that classic thing, isn't it, with a teacher? It's like, oh, well, you get however many holidays a year. And yes, I'm not going to lie, the holidays are fantastic, particularly having kids myself. It's a dream. But on the other hand, you don't get all those weeks holiday because you'll finish the end of term and then you're still in school for maybe 1-2 weeks finishing off what you've done, and you're certainly back in school 1-2 weeks before you start again. So it's much more time consuming, I suppose, and not in a particularly enjoyable way, because I wanted to teach kids when I was at school. Sport was my saving grace. I did okay academically, but I wasn't a shining star academically, and sport was my one thing where I was, without wanting to brag, I was the best, and it was my one thing where people suddenly were like, oh, you're really good at something, that's fantastic. So it just for your confidence, because I was an incredibly shy child and really only came out of my shell because of sport, because luckily I had a really good PE teacher who nurtured, my love of sport and my ability and my talent. And therefore, that's what I wanted to do as a teacher. I wanted to be that nurturing influence, that one that could spot something in a kid that maybe somebody else might not, and just pull it out of them. And and sport is just such a wonderful way of doing that. It's such a wonderful way to showcase your ability. So that's really why I got into teaching. And yeah, just now I still love it. I'm not saying I don't love the teaching, and I love the kids, and I love doing what I do, but to go back to your point of motivation, it definitely takes more maybe because I'm older, but it definitely takes more motivation now. And sometimes it is a little bit like, did I make the right choice? Did I make the right choice? But then you have the brilliant days where something wonderful happens, or last year we got a kid through to the nationals. She came second in the nationals, and that was just a huge, we're only a tiny school, so to get a kid to that level and that kind of makes it worthwhile. So
Yeah.
that's my motivation now, is pushing, I sound like a dealer, encouraging those kids onto into sport. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard when you're sat writing 100 and something reports. It's hard to find the motivation.
Yeah. You mentioned more academic side of things, having to do all the paperwork. Is that because you're doing the qualification side of things for the children as well, or is it just generally more admin is coming in to the role?
Well, so my school, we only got to year 8, so we don't actually do anything GCSE A level. And my heart goes out to anybody that teaches that. I've got a child at the moment going through GCSEs, and she's just come home off for the Easter break, and the pack of work she's got to work through is astronomical. And obviously the teachers then got to take that all back in and mark it and go through it. And she's been given all of these things she's got to work towards, and all these goals, and it's all individually set. So, oh my God, must take members of staff. I don't even want to begin to think the amount of time that must take. But for a sort of a more junior level, it's all assessment. And you've got, it just feels nowadays, in teaching especially, you have to prove everything. You have to have the documentation to say that this child can do this thing. And while that's always been certainly a part of teaching, probably like you were saying when you were teaching, you still had to, you had your bits and pieces, but the depth at which you have to go into it now is something else. The assessment criteria for the kids just doing PE, sometimes it feels like it sucks the enjoyment out of it slightly.
And is that for the kids? It takes the enjoyment away, or both?
I think it's a little bit of both. Certainly for my part, if you think you're doing a lesson and I don't know, a lot of what I do is very game based, and I try to make it as fun based as I can. But then you still have to provide the evidence that this child can, I don't know, complete the bleep test, or something like that. And it's assessment for assessment's sake. Sometimes it feels, sometimes you're ticking a box, and you've always got that in your back of your mind. There could be an inspection soon, and I just feel a little bit, just from a personal point of view nowadays, a lot of that assessment is it's not looking at the teaching. They don't come in really anymore well, they do look at your teaching, but they spend so little time watching the teaching, which is what they should be seeing. How do you engage the kids? Can you pick out that kid that needs a bit more help, or that one that's absolutely flying and needs pushing a bit more? And I just feel like they come in for such a short space of time. And don't get me wrong, I do not want the inspectors in any longer. I don't want them in any longer than they have to be in. But it's such a tiny snapshot of what we do. And the core of it, my heart is just, you should see how we teach. You should see how we are with these kids. We know what this child needs, or, we know their background. And if they need a bit more help with this, or they need a bit more love over this, we know the kids. And it just feels more and more that it's just being looked at from, right, well, you've ticked this box, you've ticked that box. Is your assessment up to date? Is this up to date? Are your fences at the right height? It's the minutia of just boring. It's just grey. It's a grey experience. There's no bells and whistles, and look at all the look at all the fab stuff, and to a certain extent that is looked at. I just feel there's more and more box ticking, and so it's it just can suck the love out of it a bit. That's a very long-winded answer. Sorry to what you asked.
No. So it's really interesting to hear, the different perspectives of it. And I think it's the same across all the people I've spoken to on this podcast, is around, certain things getting in the way of people enjoying what they do for a living. And one of the key things is you finding something that you really enjoy doing for a job. And most people go into something because they do enjoy it. But life goes on, career changes, and things get in the way. So, in terms of why I speak to people on this podcast is, how can we identify when things aren't going quite as well for us, and do something about it? Because otherwise you just drop off and you just keep going down and down and down, and then you find yourself being somewhere for 30, 40 years, the miserable one sat in the corner of the room being really negative about everything, and that's life, and I can't leave because I'm caught, and you know
Yeah.
there's obviously options there.
Mm.
You know, in terms of you keeping
Yeah.
yourself motivated for the job, has that been with you moving or doing things in slightly different ways, mixing it up? How have you kept that motivation from a teaching point of view?
I think so. I've sort of I've jumped around a little bit subject. So I've sort of I'm obviously PE trained. My degree is in PE secondary education, and my second subject is outdoor education. So I was at university, sort of down in Plymouth. So we were out on the moors doing stuff like that. But obviously, when I moved back in this direction, there's not a huge amount of need for somebody, you know, who can teach you how to sail or windsurf or rock, like, you know, it's very limited. So I've always been artistic, so I did some art teaching. So I've mixed it up by doing a little bit of art teaching. Then I moved more into DT. I'm a fairly handy person, so I taught some DT. I taught in a few different schools, and I just try to be as fresh as you can with your teaching. So there are so many brilliant different things out there to help you with your teaching, and all, you know, technology now is an amazing thing, isn't it? You know, there's so many different avenues. Just like teaching the little ones cricket, there's so many cool stuff, you know, you can do cricket wise now. They've got some brilliant all-stars cricket. So I try to keep as fresh as I can, and then it keeps me more interested. Like, I love learning about a sport I don't know a huge amount. So recently, I mean, traditionally when I first started teaching, girls did rounders, boys did cricket, and that was that. And now obviously it's much more mixed. So we've got girls now at our school, so the girls and boys all do rugby in sort of the lower years. Obviously we have to split them when they get a bit older, but the lower ones, they all do rugby, they all do football, they all do netball. So everybody does everything, and that was great for me. So cricket, I did a bit of cricket at uni, but I am not a cricketer by any stretch of the imagination. So I just loved learning a new sport and learning all the new techniques. And, you know, there's people I work with who are incredibly knowledgeable about cricket, and too much, maybe a little bit too much sometimes. I don't want to know about silly point and, I don't know, wobbly leg or whatever it's called. But just learning all the different skills and, you know, different bits for batting and field, you know, and we'll play diamond cricket, pairs cricket, and obviously full 11-a-side cricket. So that's almost 3 different sports within a sport. So learning all the rules for that. So I think I'm quite lucky in the fact that sport does give you that chance to branch out a little bit more and learn a few extra bits. And there's always, let's face it, they are always changing the rules and the regulations for every sport. So every year there's something new I've got to learn. So I think in that sense it keeps it fairly fresh.
Absolutely. No, that's fantastic. In fact, I have the pleasure of entering into another sport this weekend with lots of other old blokes and ladies as well, to be perfectly honest. We're doing some walking rugby, and
fantastic.
we need to provide a referee. So I've reffed the rugby game for a while, and I know the full rules, but you know, this walking rugby stuff. It is harder work than it sounds. It isn't. It is quite tiring, I must admit. Honestly, you know, people laugh at me, but anyway, you know, that's a good way of mixing it up, and that's for me. I've finished playing the game, but I wanted to keep contact with it, keep motivation around sport, etc. So to your point, absolutely fits in well. So where you are now, then, how did rugby? We've just mentioned it. How did you get into rugby then? Because I don't want to be rude in any way, but you may have started playing it back when the game of rugby wasn't quite as women's rugby particularly wasn't quite as well known. So how did you get into playing rugby then?
So I was always an athlete. So I've always been fast. I used to do lots of athletics. I did regional athletics. I had ranks, so I got rankings as well. I was 11th fastest in the country for 200 meters at one point when I was 14. So I was quick. So I'd always done athletics. And when I went to during my GCSEs, actually, we had a PE teacher came along, and she'd done some rugby at uni. So she taught us a bit of rugby, and we were running around doing it, and we were doing some tackling. And she said to me, "Oh, I was doing all right. And she said, "Oh, we'll see if you can tackle me." And I tackled her and, and fractured her arm. And I thought, this is amazing. This is the best sport in the world. You get to run around. We did some kicking, and anyway, loved it. So thank you to the teacher for introducing me to that. And then sort of didn't think any more of it. Carried on doing the athletics. Did a bit of netball. And when I went to university, they didn't have. Well, they had an athletics team, but no real sprint team. I am absolutely not a distance runner by any stretch of imagination. 200 meters, maybe 400 at a push. Wasn't really my scene, netball. And then the rugby team were just like, "Oh, we need some players. Just come and have a run around." And I just absolutely found my calling. Really, it was like, this is brilliant. There's just no other sport, especially back then, where you can run around with the ball. You could run into people. It was so much freer than a lot of other women's sports at the time. It was just something totally different. Loved it. Played my first game, got a try with my first touch of the ball, and was just absolutely enamored. Never looked back, really. Just took off from there.
So that sort of your explanation around the freedom within the sport, that obviously explained that, the word love. You love the sport, and the motivation sort of comes from there. Absolutely, and I get it to a certain degree, and I think there's lots of people who more these days are starting to understand it, because it's opening up and there's more women playing, and different, diverse teams, etc., which is fantastic. But back in the time where you were then starting to play for the likes of Richmond, how was your motivation? That's what I'm looking for. How was it boosted or kept going by the club, or wasn't it? Was there a them and us? How did it look at the club scene at that time?
And Richmond were pretty good. Like, we were allowed to play on the main pitch, which a lot of women's teams weren't allowed to at the time. It was absolutely not. You play on the back pitch, and you can be thankful that you're doing that. So we were quite lucky with Richmond in that respect. I had they were just brilliant teammates. I had really lovely bunch of girls to hang out with as well. So for me, it was not only the sports side of things, but it was obviously the social side of things. And I think that's the lovely thing about rugby, isn't it? It's a very social sport. So it was my sporting life, and it was my social life. And like I say, Richmond were pretty supportive of the ladies. Compare that to, before my time, but a very well-known English rugby player, Emma Mitchell, who's an absolute superstar of the women's game, and was still playing when I was playing. Still tell tales of when first trying to put a women's team together at Saracens, and they were told, "Well, no, we don't, not really, but I tell you what, you can use one of the pitches if you will help serve the food at some of the men's bits and pieces." So yes, so we didn't have that. So at least when I started, things had moved on slightly.
Yeah.
It was still very much in its women's rugby was still very much in its infancy. So there was still, to be honest with you.
Hello, hope you're enjoying this episode. When you've finished, why not subscribe to the Motivational Mindset podcast to learn more about motivation in business and beyond. Thanks. Now back to the podcast.
A lot of that was probably my motivation. Like, no, we do deserve to be here, and we certainly at the time, women's rugby and men's rugby maybe was slightly different, because we didn't have the big kickers in our game. You look at some of the women playing now, Zoe Harrison and what have you, they can really hoof that ball. Back in the day, we had a few good kickers. They were few and far between. So the men's game and the women's game certainly looked slightly different, but a lot of people enjoyed our game because it was more open, and it was more running. It wasn't so much, it wasn't a scrum every 2 minutes. So a lot of my motivation was, well, no, we deserve to be here. We train just as hard as men, and we're off the pitch, we're doing the same work. It's just that it was different, but things are changing. So it's positive.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting one, isn't it? It's we'll show them. sort of idea of actually, do you know what? Yeah, we can play this sport, we can do these things, but somebody telling us we can't is red rag to the bull and all that sort of thing,
Yeah.
which is really interesting. Whereas some people might have just left. So the rugby started coming on, and then from there you start to get into the England side of things. Is that right?
Yeah.
How does that change the dynamic? Is there a difference in your motivation for the sport when you get to that national level?
I think so. So my journey, I was invited to England trials. I can't even remember where they were. It was so long ago. So went to the England trials and I didn't get selected. And I came away and I just remember feeling just gutted, absolutely heartbroken. And so that was the real like, well, I don't want to feel like that again, you know. So I had to then, I was going to have to wait a full year, you know, to maybe make it again. And then it was, I mean, by the grace of God, and I am a very lucky person, there happened to be a talent scout came to watch one of my matches, and in fact it was still when I was playing down in Plymouth. Just happened to be a scout was down watching the game, and actually she come to watch somebody else, and luckily I had a good game. And so she's the one that sort of championed me and pushed me forward. So I almost sort of snuck in through the back through the back. But and just so then to go from that absolute pits of disappointment, like, oh my God, I'm not good enough, I'm never going to make it, I've got to try harder, I've got to do more, I've got to do more. And then this absolute, you know, it was like somebody'd opened a door, and it gave me such a boost. And I think that probably almost gave me more of a kick in the ass than if I had just had to battle my way, because then I'd made it into sort of, you know, the potential selection squad. But I almost felt a little bit like, well, I've absolutely got to prove that I should be here, because, you know, I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky to have been given this opportunity. So a lot of it was I've got to prove that I deserve to be here and I deserve my spot. And luckily I did, you know, so I'm very lucky. But yeah.
Some might say, yeah, you obviously you drive your own luck. You say you interesting enough, you used the words there, I am a lucky person. Yeah, it depends on how you view the world and what you do to make that luck happen, isn't it? So I think that in terms of that whole motivation piece as well is, you know, people can get very demotivated because they don't choose to actually do the things that will make the difference. It's always that victim side of things come into play. So from that's really interesting from the sport side of things. So as you get that motivation to play international sport, which I can imagine is absolutely brilliant, you know, it's the pinnacle of things. These days, the women's game are playing again. England, Wales. I think it was the other weekend. You know, the Cardiff was half three quarters full. You know, lots of people watching it. You didn't have that back in when you were playing, I presume, when you had those international games. It was on a much smaller scale. So
your parents and the dog.
Yeah. Did that impact the way that you sort of felt about the game? You're like, well, actually, the men's game's got all of this, and then we're still doing this. How did that sort of come across?
I think from my point of view, it is a double-edged sword, isn't it? Getting that support, and I certainly found that as my career grew. So initially, when I was first playing, you get an okay crowd, but certainly, I mean, God, nothing like they get now. I was at Twickenham when the Red Roses got their record crowd for a women's game, and I had a proper emotional breakdown about it. I mean, absolutely pathetic, blubbing my eyes out when we were singing the national anthem, because it was one of those, look how far we've come. But I think I'm a very critical person. And so playing in front of a massive crowd like that, oh my God, the pressure those girls are under, the scrutiny those girls are under now. So when I was first playing, like I said, we'd get a decent crowd. And certainly as my career went on, crowds got bigger and bigger. And then we'd play some internationals. We had some games at the Stoop at Harlequins Ground, Twickenham. So we had some there. And I think that was when suddenly it was like, oh my God, there's people watching me. They're watching me play rugby, and I've got to do my best. So you put that extra pressure on yourself, but also it does motivate you to be better and play at your best, because you've got all these eyes watching you. Oh my God, and if you drop the ball or you knock it on, it's just the worst thing in the world. So it's a huge a huge motivator, and it shouldn't be, but you want to please, don't you want to please the crowd. We played a cup final, so when I was playing for Richmond, we had a cup final against Wasps, and we were playing at Twickenham, and I mean, that was just, I mean, I'm very fortunate in my career from when I started. So my university played in the Booser final, so we played at Twickenham then, and that was before they were letting England women play there, so we were lucky to get a game there. So we had that. Then, like I say, we had the cup final game against Wasps at Twickenham, and it was played before the men's cup final. And I think afterwards it must have been Leicester. Who was playing afterwards? Leicester somebody. And so towards the end of our match, the stand was filling. And then it was like, God, this is what it's like. This must be what it's like for the men to play, because the crowds were coming in. And I got to score a try, and Austin Healy, as I ran past, went, "Shit, she's fast." Austin Healy's seen me. So that, and it was, you want to please the crowd, you want to make the crowd happy, and you want to show off. It's which is really awful, isn't it? But you want to show what you can do. And one of the biggest motivational games, I think we did a tour in New Zealand in 2001, and it was sort of one of the best big tours we'd done as an international side. And again, we played 2 tests against Australia, and then we had 2 guest tests against New Zealand. And New Zealand hadn't been beaten for 10 years. They were rugby gods, these women. They seemed untouchable. But we had lottery funding, and the closer we were getting, we were closer and closer and closer. So our first test, we just lost out to them, and that was like, everybody went away from that game just full of, we can do better, we can do better, we can take them in. Everybody was pushing each other, motivating each other, and training. That's everything we were aimed towards. And again, the second test we played against them was in front of, it was in North Harbour Stadium. And again, we were playing before a men's game, and it was New Zealand, Samoa were playing after us. So again, the second half of the game, the stadium was filling. So, and actually didn't have a bad crowd for that game, but towards the end, sort of the last 10 minutes of the match, the crowd was at capacity. And that was just, my God, that gave you such a boost, that noise, and we were the baddies because obviously everyone was there for the Black Ferns. So we were sort of, you were the real baddies, but that gave you that sort of motivation as well. It was oh my God, that's probably the best game I've played in. And like I say, that must be what it's like for, now for the women to play in front of these big crowds. You're terrified to make a mistake, but you're desperate to prove you should be there.
Yeah, so it's always a mixture of motivators are kicking in there, and it's interesting you mentioned about wanting to show people how good you are and sort of almost showing off. And it's an interesting one, because a lot of people see that as quite a negative trait or a negative motivator, but actually it isn't, because if it fills you with energy and actually makes you perform better, then as long as you're doing it in a way that isn't, hey, look at me, I'm absolutely amazing, like brilliant, you just put it into action and you make it happen, that sort of thing, and you have this, you're humble around it and all of those sort of things. That makes a massive difference, in terms of the way people perform. It does take it to that next level. So it's really interesting to hear those different motivational sort of factors coming in across what you're talking about there. And for those people you're listening on the podcast, you can hear in Emily's voice, the passion and recollecting. And I'm sat here on Zoom, and I can see Emily's face, and she's talking about it in such a way that you can see
getting redder.
You're there,
redder and redder. You're
back there. It's brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. So things don't last forever. When you stopped playing, how did that sort of manifest itself within you from that sort of motivational point of view? Did you just go, oh, that's it, never going to do anything again, or completely walk away? How did it come across?
I had an injury, so I was only playing a club game for Richmond, and I ruptured my ACL, and it went with a bang. So it took my medial with it and did cartilage damage as well. So I had my knee rebuilt, and after I had that done, I was desperate to prove, to show that everything was fine and I could still play again. but because I'd had that little break from rugby, it was a little bit like, oh, there is life out the other side. So I got full fitness, and I went back into training, and I went back into selection matches, and I kind of temporarily, I think, lost a little bit of the passion for it and a little bit of the love, which is, now look back on it, it's a really sad thing. But I mean, I've been doing competitive athletics, I suppose, since 13, and then I'd gone to the rugby. So that's a long time. It's a lot of years of not having weekends, and just living and breathing sport, which is great in some ways. But I know lots of sports people talk about it. You make a lot of sacrifices, and particularly, there was no money in what I was doing. We had some lottery funding towards the end, but that really only sort of helped with petrol or a little bit of this, that, and the other. So I was doing, full days teaching. Then I'd drive to Richmond straight after finishing work to train until sort of 9:30, drive home, straight back into work the next day. So doing that twice a week, and then obviously either club games or international duty or international training on the weekends. There's a lot. And for me, to be honest, it was the traveling that I think was the final nail. Often it was just, I was living in a car, and just, yeah. And I think in a way it's almost, I think if I always feel for people who an injury ends their career, because you've had no choice in it. It's done. You can't go. Whereas I think I was lucky in the sense that I was able to go, actually, do you know what? I think I'm done. I was one of the older members of the team as well. There were lots of there's young people snapping at your heels all the time, and that's puts a lot of psychological pressure on you to constantly be looking over your shoulder and what have you. So I think I made the decision to retire, and I decided I was retiring totally. So I stopped club as well, because obviously it still would have meant all the traveling, still playing for Richmond. So I decided I was going to finish. So I sort of hung up my rugby boots totally. And it was really hard initially, because I did miss it. And all my friends obviously were in, pretty much all of my friends more or less were in Richmond or around rugby. And for like a good few years, I couldn't even bear to watch a match. Really weird, isn't it, looking back on it now? But I kind of, and it wasn't that I was bitter about it. I think I was so done with it. I just needed to give myself that time away, because it had been so all encompassing for so many years. And I just wanted, time to be me, I suppose, not be Emily, the rugby player, or Emily, the sport person, just be Emily.
Yeah.
Turns out she's really dull. And I should have probably.
Well, now you say it, actually. Now for those people who don't know, who might think, oh, well, you didn't like to watch rugby matches after you retired, etc. That isn't the case now. Having have watched rugby with you in the same room, it's actually quite dangerous, because Emily gets very excited by watching any form of rugby. And generally sort of grabbing at people and getting far too excited, but that passion is still there for the game. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. And actually, I think although I did that kind of cold turkey bit, as I refer to it, I think that was because when I came back to it, I just fell in love with the sport all over again. Just if there's any rugby on, I will watch it. I force my children to watch it. Luckily, two of my children are into the rugby now. We've got a brilliant bunch of mates who are rugby mad as well. And I think you have to be slightly rugby mad to be friends with me, because like you say, yeah, I am quite grabby. I should probably go on some kind of register or list for how I behave in it.
No, but maybe.
I'm so sorry about your bruised arms. But yes, I just love it. I just love the sport. I love, everything around it. I love the social side of it. And I've got just such brilliant friends from playing rugby. I'm lucky. I'm so lucky to have done what I've done, and to have done it for as long as I did. And that's part of the teaching, I suppose. You want to instill that passion and that love into other people. And when you find a bunch of people that feel the same way as you, it's great, isn't it? You know, and I can bore the back legs off of somebody about rugby. And you know, if you go out to a party or you're meeting up with a bunch of mates, I can see the people that don't like rugby trying to sidle away from me. And I'm like, no, let me tell you, let me tell you about the benefits of Abby Dow over Jess Breach, or, you know, what have you. Yeah, so hugely passionate about rugby, and obviously women's rugby. You know, it's a huge passion of mine. It's a huge part of me. And it's nice to instill that love into future generations of England players. So I've been I went into an England training camp last year and did a talk to the girls. You know, they're desperate, or not, they're keen to connect with ex-players, and, you know, we're referred to as the pioneers. So they'll have a group of us in, and we spoke about our experiences and what things were like back in our day, back when all of this was fields. And I was playing, you know, talking about those grassroots beginnings of rugby to where they are now. And I think it makes them appreciate the sport so much more, because, I mean, not so much me, more the girls before me, they had to fight for, you know, to be recognised. So like I say, like that's why I had this emotional moment at Twickenham that time, because it is just like, geez, look at this. We could never have imagined this back when I was playing. We wanted it, and that was what pushed us on. And the thing we say is always, you want to leave the shirt in a better place than where you took it. So you're trying to push the sport on, you're trying to move the sport on. And it's just brilliant. Yeah. So yes, I am passionate. I will shut up.
No, I think anybody listening, if you've never been into any form of rugby, or if you do like rugby and don't watch the women's game, get into the women's game, because it is exciting, it's fast, it's different, it's played in a different way, and there's room across all of the sport for it to be there, and it done it, you know, and it's a really, really good way of a role model for a lot of young women out there as well.
Absolutely. And I think as well, it is that bit more accessible. So you know, it's to Twickenham game. You know, tickets are cheaper. Tickets are a lot cheaper to go and watch the women's game than it is, you know, to go and watch a men's Six Nations games now. My God, it's, you know, I can't afford to take my family to watch a men's game. You know, it's just not doable. Whereas the women's game, it's cheaper, you know, and there's concessions for children, so you play less for the kids. So it's a real a women's game. There's a real family atmosphere, though. I love. That's brilliant. Yeah, it's great, and yeah, seeing all the kids there, it's brilliant. And that's what we want to do. We want to instill this love into the next generation and get girls and young women out there playing the sport. You know, it's growing so fast. It's brilliant. So yeah.
It's amazing. It is fantastic. And so with all of that passion inside you for the game of rugby, as we come to the end of our conversation, thank you very much for spending some time with us. Are there, or is there a top tip or certain things that you would suggest people could focus on if they're looking for that motivation with what they're doing, whether it's a sport thing or a career thing? Is there something that you did or that you found most beneficial from a motivational point of view?
I think, well, like I said, I think my big thing was just loving what I did and enjoying it. And if something wasn't working, right, be brave enough to change it, or be brave enough to just do something a bit different. I mean, something I just ridiculous. I'm just talking to people. Do you know what? That's the big thing that probably helped me the most is being right. My kicking off my left foot is rubbish, and then finding somebody who's a great kick off the left foot and going, right, okay, talk me through it. How do you do it? How does it make it better? Or I was a nightmare. I always would choose to tackle on my right rather than my left, which is, I always played on the left wing, so absolutely terrible. So speaking to somebody, or you know, just finding somebody with that nugget of information or that little bit of knowledge, and not being scared of people who are better than you or know more than you. You know, knowledge is power, isn't it? And if you're willing to impart, or they're willing to impart that knowledge onto you, it's only going to make you better. And it works, you know, the other way as well. You know, trying to pass now what I know, onto somebody else. I think sometimes people can be selfish with information, can't they? And they can be possessive over tiny bits that they do better than other people. But whereas I think actually you need to share those things. And I'm only obviously talking from a sports point of view, but
I think it's relevant across whatever people do. That idea of asking questions, listening, and then sharing, etc., can motivate people as well. Instilling knowledge into other people, being the teacher, being the coach, is a great way of motivating yourself, of gathering energy and keeping it for yourself. So absolutely, I think it's a really great point. And thanks ever so much for letting the listeners into that one. That's fantastic.
My pleasure.
Well, thank you very much for your time, and I wish you every luck with your ongoing PE career, and enjoy the summer, because that was the best thing I used to love about being a PE teacher. You get to walk around in your shorts and your t-shirt whilst all the other teachers are in classrooms.
Absolutely, nobody wants my job. From sort of November through to mid-March, everybody's pitting the PE teachers. From then onwards, it's your classroom with your textbooks, and I'm out here with my whistle and my shorts. So.
Definitely, well, it's the way to go. And we're recording this actually on one of the loveliest days of the year, so it's time to go outside, and it's a Friday afternoon to go outside, sit in the sun, and maybe have a little beverage of some description. So, Emily, thank you ever so much for your time. It's been lovely to speak to you.
My pleasure, Rich. No worries.
This was a Switch Motivation production from Switch Performance Limited. Music by Dennis Kischuk from Pixabay, the Motivational Mindset Podcast. Download, listen, subscribe.